10:04 WRIF. And Michigan Daily, I guess just for old time's sake, went back to relive the Doors disaster at Michigan. The Doors as in Jim Morrison and the Doors. It's funny because, you know, Jim Morrison performing live was a disaster so many times. Well, not all the time, but there were a few major missteps. And there's a shot of the stage, which is, Mark, where's that in relation to Yost Arena? You can see Yost Arena in the background.
I thought it looks like it's inside Yost.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I thought it was outside. It looks like a brick wall there, but no.
Well, it's brick inside on the end.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's got the banners coming down, so that would be inside. They wouldn't have banners outside. But it was homecoming weekend in 1967, and they'd had, in previous years, the Righteous Brothers, the Four Tops, people like that. So they had Buffy St. Marie, the folk singer, Ramsey Lewis, the jazz pianist. I can't imagine Ramsey Lewis for homecoming. And then for the Friday night dance at the Intramural Sports Building, the Doors, which was a great pick at the time. The Doors were red hot. That first record had just come out with Light My Fire.
Good God.
And, that's one of the best first albums anyone's ever put out. And they were monsters. Light My Fire was just owned the radio that summer. I mean, I remember that as a kid.
Yeah, that was huge, all right. Enormous hit. Lots of play.
It was that muted version, though, that took about 2/3 of the jam out of that song.
Yeah, right.
Which, of course, pissed the Doors off to hear a 7-minute song knocked down to like 3:10 or something. Yeah. But the Doors took the stage on the evening of October the 20th. The surprisingly small audience was in for a unique experience, but for all the wrong reasons. It turned out to be a memorable disaster. Beyond disappointing hundreds of fans, the fateful show would also prove to be an event that may well have altered the history of rock and roll. Among those in the crowd, 19-year-old UM sophomore Fred LeBour, who paid $3 for himself and a date to see the band whose hypnotic single, Light My Fire, had been burning up the charts since June. I was a big fan, recalls LeBour, today better known as Too Slim of the country and western act Riders in the Sky. I love the first album front to back, the weird circus grooves, the poetry, the end, even a Kurt Weill song, such a unique, compelling sound. Boy, they have their own sound. That's one of the neat things about the Doors.
Oh, they sure did.
Between Manzarek's organ, Morrison's voice, and even the bottom of the Doors, it is totally unique. I mean, I can smell a Doors song. If just play me a little, I don't even have to hear Morrison's voice.
Yeah, well, that's the mark of a great band where you know exactly who it is a couple of notes into it. And they are totally unique, even to this day. Very, very, very unique with that. Well, the organ is the big deal.
And no bass guitar.
And no bass, yeah.
The opening act that evening was the Long Island Sound, one of campus's top dance bands. Their set was well received, included a number of tracks from the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. I didn't know people covered. I can't see covering songs off that. That's really interesting. Which had been released just a few months before. Then it was time for the Doors, who took the stage to enthusiastic applause, but without Jim Morrison. The other three band members launched into the opening riff of their song Soul Kitchen, which they played over and over while everyone waited for Morrison to appear. Didn't happen. After a while, it got uncomfortable, said Fred LeBour. There was scattered booing. The band withdrew and then returned about half an hour later, this time accompanied by Jim Morrison, who seemed in no condition to be on stage. Morrison could barely stand up. He was practically falling on his face every few moments.
Oh.
Long Island Sound Steve Wellcome, who had stayed to hear the Doors, remembers Morrison lurching up to the microphone and making weird sounds that the audience soon realized were words, F-bombs to be exact.
Oh.
At the time, it was kind of an outrageous thing to say, explains Wellcome. The girls started to blush. Guys were putting their hands over the girls' ears. How stupid.
God.
You can't hear this, darling. In fact, you know what? They have some shots of, the Long Island Sound, the backup band, and also you can tell some people in the crowd are wearing coats and ties.
Oh, weird.
Man, were people square back then.
Oh, boy.
A coat and a tie? You know, sometimes when you see shots of college football games in the 60s, I noticed this looking through an old Vatek. It was like It's kind of like a generalized yearbook from like 1950 on, but some of the shots from the 60s, people are wearing coats and ties to the football game. What is that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Very formal.
I went down to Nashville once to see a Vanderbilt game. Vanderbilt was playing the Hokies. And the crowd, this is in like 1982 or 83, people wearing coats and ties.
Still.
At a college football game in the 80s. What is that?
UVA still does that, don't they? Isn't that their tradition there?
You know, they used to. If they still do it.
I think they do.
Wow. Unbelievable. How silly.
Well, and there's the Beatles with ties, you know. But it was the look. Those thin ties.
They reference how many people in the crowd had crew cuts. A lot of football players. They said it wasn't the hippest dance you could imagine.
I can imagine.
And the Doors, I mean, this California band, I just can't picture this. Morrison was in a foul state. The audience was angry. The place was becoming chaotic. The atmosphere in the unseasonably warm gymnasium grew tense as the audience's shock turned to anger. Long Island Sound's Gary Muntz recalls Morrison was in a terrible state of mind, proceeded to crank up the temperature a few more degrees when he started throwing things into the crowd. That's when it got really nasty. The police were called, and the pie-eyed singer was persuaded to leave the stage, very likely averting an outbreak of violence. People were mad. Doors keyboardist Ray Manzarek remembers that evening well. It all started, he said, when the band decided to stop for a frosty treat while riding in the limo from Detroit to Ann Arbor. We all wanted ice cream, says Manzarek, but Jim says, ice cream is for babies. I want whiskey. So he had to stop at a liquor store and buy a bottle of booze. Oh, so no one's allowed to eat ice cream around Jim Morrison? Ice cream is for babies! What an ass. Something about the others eating ice cream seemed to set Morrison off. I can't believe people are eating ice cream. I'm getting drunk! What? How stupid. For the rest of the trip, he sat in the back drinking sullenly.
Sullenly?
People are eating ice cream. I'm disgusted. I'm going to get drunk. By the time they reached Ann Arbor, the singer was drunk as a skunk, said Ray Manzarek. When he finally came out on stage, he was unable and unwilling to perform.
Oh, great. Boy, that worked out real well.
He's missing all the cues and at some point started berating the audience. I'm thinking, Jim, do not anger these people. They're football players. Look at their thick necks. But he just kept going on and on. Finally, Robbie Krieger and John Densmore walked off the stage, outraged and disgusted. Yeah, I read about this in John Densmore's book. This is John Densmore. Really, you know how Manzarek tends to play up Jim Morrison. He tends to talk about his greatness as opposed to his.
Definitely.
John Densmore's kind of the opposite. Really, really pissed at Jim Morrison. A desperate Manzarek grabbed up a guitar and fingered a few blues chords, hoping to get anything going, but Morrison was too stoned to even sing the blues. Eventually, the befuddled vocalist simply sat down on the riser. I was shocked, says Manzarek. It was the first time he'd been that messed up. Unfortunately, it wasn't the last. The brief remainder of Jim Morrison's life would be filled with similar incidents. 2 days later at Williams College in Massachusetts, where before a hopelessly bewildered crowd, the singer staggered about in a daze and fell to the stage sobbing. Oh, that's a great show.
Yeah, that's nice. Sobbing.
Yeah, some people called it the best cry ever.
God.
All right, I'm turning it down. And mixing it with the demon yelling.
Jeez.
The Long Island Sound ended up taking over for the Doors since they couldn't finish their set. So they became the heroes of the show. The guys who were doing the dance came running up and asked us to play another set, remember Steve Welcome? So we jumped up and started playing, and everybody started dancing. It was great. We won the whole crowd, and everybody was happy. Man, how do you do that when they think they're going to see the Doors?
I know it.
People were pretty weird in the 60s, weren't they?
I guess so.
Pretty square.
Really, how would that happen when you're so prepared for one thing and then you get that? You'd think they wouldn't have accepted anything other than the Doors. When that didn't work, they'd tear the joint down.
Iggy Pop was at that show. One person in the crowd thought differently, a UM dropout named Jim Osterberg, who had recently started his own rock band. Like most others, Osterberg watched in astonishment as Morrison stumbled around the stage, making strange noises, swearing, and antagonizing the audience. Instead of being annoyed, Osterberg thought it was cool. It makes sense. Inspired by what he had witnessed, former member of the Ann Arbor High School debate team adopted the nom de guerre of Iggy Pop, and with his band, the Stooges, went on to alter rock and roll history. Wow. So I guess by that theory, without that Doors show, there's no Iggy Pop. Without Iggy, no Sex Pistols, no Nirvana, no White Stripes. You can't say without Iggy, none of those bands would exist. I think it's a little bit of a stretch there, but I get it. Anyway.
Boy, oh boy.
What a disaster, Jim. The Doors movie even, I don't know, I never get the feeling like, boy, I really miss that guy.
I know.
Wish he was still around.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's kind of a weird story, really.
The documentary that just came out.
Weird, yeah.
Remember we talked to Ray about that? It's a great documentary in the Doors, but again, I can't say it made me really miss this guy. I just never feel that way.
What a troubled, screwed up dude, really.
Same thing with
a mess.
I love reading bios, anything I can get my hands on about all these great bands, but every time I read about Nirvana, I never find myself going, "Oh, what a great guy." He's so depressing. I get depressed reading about Kurt Cobain.
Yeah.
It bums me out. It's like, boy, life just seems hopeless if you're around this guy for long, or if you're reading about him even.
Yeah, definite bummer. Bleak.
10:15 at WRIF on what looks like a...